Hey everyone, again, this is Dr. Lenicky doing a final podcast for Chapter 8, Leadership Models in Practice. Chapter 8 is rather long, and so I'm going to break it up into two podcasts just to give you a little bit of a break because it's about 60 some slides. I'll do 30 or so in the first podcast and then 30 or so in the second. So here we're taking the leadership theories and putting them into practice. We're going to talk about, I think it is 6 different leadership models, how you can take the leadership theories and a lot of the assessments we did before and put them into practice. So, as a leader, there are risks and costs to a program in action, but they are far less than the long range risks and costs of comfortable inaction. So in other words, doing nothing may be as detrimental to your organization as doing something and making changes. As a leader, making decisions can be difficult, and can cause short-term difficulties, but not making changes can cause long-range problems. Right? Through this podcast and the next, we're going to talk about 6 different leadership models. The first one is the PAARP, and it was actually developed by the authors of this text. The dynamic culture leadership model, the reframing leadership and management in organizations model, the leadership, art, and science and public leadership model, the multiple linkage model, and the impossible leadership model. All right, first is the PAARP model. This stands for purpose, assemble, align, resource, and perform. And so we will talk about each of these phases of the PAARP model. All right, first is purpose. As the leader, you need to define the purpose of the group or of the organization. This provides clarity to the individuals, understanding where they're going, gives them a challenge, allows them to have commitment to that organization because they understand what it's about. You can also get feedback from the individuals, and it helps define task complexity. The individuals need to know that the group will work as a unit, and to provide clarity to the purpose will help with that. Right, next, as a leader, you need to assemble the group. And so this can be hiring new individuals, or if you're doing something within an organization, finding the individuals within that organization that are appropriate for your group. Realize that you need to take into account those who have the knowledge, skills, and abilities. So all sorts of different skills can be used for the proposed team members. Make sure the group members have the interpersonal skills and are able to work together. I know you all just did a reflective journal on working together as a group, and many of them that I read did talk about interpersonal differences and how difficult it made the group together. How difficult it made the group to be able to work together. All right, the next phase is align. So the responsibilities of the leader are to help the competing needs of the group members to align and work as one. The needs are manifested through the forming, storming, norming, and performing. So we just talked about this. These 4 stages in the middle, forming, storming, norming, and performing, are all part of the align. And so the leadership needs were talked about in chapter 7 of what you need to do to help the group move on from this phase. All right, so we've moving on to the next phase is resource. So we've done the purpose, we've talked about assembling and aligning individuals. So now we need to help individuals set goals. Now these can be goals for the team member or goals for the team as a group. So again, going back to chapter 5, why do we set goals? They do help to focus an individual on a challenging task. Well-defined goals show greater improvement in performance than vague and easy goals. Make sure when you're setting goals for each person or each group that they're lofty and they help give direction and purpose to what they're doing. So what are the responsibilities of leadership in this resource phase? So to specify objectives or tasks to be completed, again, this is very similar to goals. Determine how the performance will be measured. Specifying the standard to which the tasks or objectives will be completed. Specifying the time period in which the goal must be accomplished. Placing a priority on goals when more than one exists. Rating goals as to their difficulty and importance, and determining requirements for coordinating the team members. So think about in clinical practice, when you set goals for a patient, you may have 6, 7, 8 goals. Some are more important to get initially, and some are more important to get at the end. Um, it's easy to delineate the difference in clinical practice, and you need to parallel leadership of individuals with that. So you're going to set goals, but you need to be the one that says, this is what we need to do now. This is our first goal. This is where we're going to focus our time and effort initially. All right, and the final stage of the PAARP is perform. And so this is when people start to do the work. And there's 5 types of followers. So there's sheep. These are team members who are very passive and require the leader to motivate them externally. There's the yes people. These are the people that are, they're not going to question the leader. They're going to go along with everything. These can be good to have for a group if you need a lot of followers. But if you need people who think outside the box and who are willing to professionally challenge each other, yes people are not always good. Pragmatics, these are the people who support the majority decision and tend to remain in the background of the group. Alienated, these can be the ones who question the leader or attempt to stall or bring down the efforts of the group. People who are alienators are rarely beneficial to a group. Then you have star followers. These people are independent, positive, and active. They get things done. And star followers are usually great to have in a group. All right, the next leadership model we're going to talk about is the dynamic culture leadership model. And so in this model, leadership in the dynamic culture model is recognized at 3 levels as the critical ingredient for success. So at the personal level, so working with individuals, at a team level, and at the organizational level. So there's an emphasis on organizational culture, and leadership is the key at all of these levels. The goal is to change the culture of the organization. Culture is very difficult to change, but when it does change, the entire organization can benefit from it. So, in the dynamic culture leadership model, you need to be the right leader at the right time. And so, you cannot be only descriptive or prescriptive. You have to have a balance of that. And the optimized level of leadership will depend on the situation. This may not be achievable. It's hard to be the perfect leader in every single situation, but it's a worthy goal and an ideal state to have that. I realize this type of leadership model deals a lot with situational and transformational leadership. Right? In the dynamic culture leadership model, you have to determine the organizational culture, mission, vision, and strategies. Um, Assess the situation before determining your leadership style. And so, transformational leadership provides the best approach to lead people and manage resources in a dynamic world. First, assess the situation, then, you determine your leadership style. So, we talked early in this semester about the difference between leadership and management. Um, with leadership, you're looking at the long distance focus of the organization. And with management, you're often dealing with the day to day or the shorter time horizon. You're worried with leadership about the vision and the mission. With management, you're concerned mostly with the mission. In leadership, you want to make sure that you're doing the right thing. And with management, you want to make sure you're doing things correctly. And so it's more focused on compliance of rules and policies. Um, Leadership wants to make sure that organizations have the correct components where management is dealing with what is going on right now. You deal with the people you have and how can you make the people you have work best. Leadership works at developing and refining the organizational culture to meet external environment's needs. So they want to change the culture and the need and the focus of the organization based on what will best fit into society. Where management wants to maintain organizational climate to ensure performance. So again, it is much more short term. Leadership is worried about the timing and tempo of initiatives and projects, where the management they're scheduling those initiatives and projects. So understanding the difference between a leader and a manager in a dynamic cultural leadership model is essential. We've also talked about in the past whether leadership was an art or a science. And so understanding the difference will help with dynamic culture leadership. So the fact that it's a science, you deal with technical skills, you make decisions based on analysis, develop systems that are important to the organization. You consider those systems as being the experts, and you worry about cost control. Where the art of leadership, you worried about relationships, so networking and the interpersonal relationships. You often make decisions based on the perceptions of people. You work at developing relationships and networks, and those people that you make relationships with are the experts. And your focus is image and customer relationship. That is what is important. There's often not a only science and an only art focus based on leadership. It has to be a good mix of both. So the dynamic culture leadership model entails a process that emphasizes leadership, team assessment, communication, strategic development, decision-making alignment, employee enhancement, and learning organization improvement. So there's a sequence shown in the next slide that we're going to get to that has the best potential to deal with change in the environment. We're building a culture that is effective even during times of change. Okay, first you get your team together. We've talked about assembling good teams in the past. The second for changing culture is to work on communication, improve communication. This can be done through modeling. Usually if a leader has good communication skills, it trickles down to others and they understand the importance of communication. If modeling doesn't solve all the communication problems, some training may be necessary. And the next is strategic planning. So develop a strategic plan. This is the structured and inclusive process of planning to determine the mission, vision, strategies, goals, objectives, and plan. So understanding the organizational mission is very important in strategic planning. All right, next is the decision-making alignment. Align the decision-making of a team. So work on the operational plan while understanding the reality of your decision-making. Right, employee enhancement. So assess the knowledge, skills, and abilities. Give responsibility to the proper individuals. If someone has poor interpersonal skills, their main focus of that job should not be dealing with others. Make sure that you give the right person the right job. Knowledge management. Use what the organization knows and what it has learned to improve both the effectiveness and the efficiency of what you're doing. So evaluate at this point. How is the organization meeting those goals and working towards their mission? You reflect on what you've done and how that has progressed or not progressed your organization. And then you retrain and retool. So you start back again at where can we improve? Do we need to change our mission? Have we met our goals? And so it is a cycle. So you have this team, but you constantly go through a cycle of changing the organization. Right, in the dynamic culture leadership model, members of the leadership team must be thoughtful in their consistency to the organization's mission, vision, strategies, and goals and values. Also within the constructs and process constructs. So always keep in mind the mission and vision when progressing through the 9 steps that we talked about on the previous slide. Right, there is a test you can take. We are not going to do it in this um, class this year, but dynamic cultural leadership assessment. And so um, they talked about people being a balanced leader, whether they're dealing with the art or the science, and also between management and leadership. And so those who feel that it is much more of an art and more of a leader, they're good at relationship leading, where if you feel you're art and management, you're a relationship manager. Similar to the science side, you're a technical or analytical leader if you um, worry more about the science and leadership. You're a technical or analytical manager if you focus more on the science and management. So, being a balanced leader or a balanced manager is good, but ideally, if you're equalized between a leader and a manager, that is ideal. So, within this dynamic culture leadership creation, uh, how do you change culture? And so, uh, there are five primary mechanisms to changing culture. So, attention is number one. Leaders communicate their priorities. We talked about how important communication is in the dynamic culture leadership. Values, their concerns, by the choice of things they ask about, they measure, they comment on, they praise, and they criticize. So, where they focus their attention is where the culture is more likely to change. So, their reaction to crisis, that's number two. This can be learning, this reaction increases learning about the values and assumptions. So, role modeling. Role modeling is so important in leadership. And as a leader in a dynamic culture leadership model, your behaviors will set the examples for others. Right. So number four is allocation of resources. Dividing your resources where you need the culture to change the most will be beneficial. And then the criteria for selection and dismissal. So as a leader, you're influencing the culture by recruiting the people that have those same values, skills, traits, and then either by promoting those who are successful um, and able to exhibit the culture that you want, or firing the ones that exhibit the culture that you don't want. Um, Several of you during the reflective models with conflict talked about someone who had to be fired or had to be moved from their position. Um, it is a difficult task. We talked about that on the very first slide. Sometimes removing someone from a situation can cause a lot of short term problems. But imagine keeping that person in your organization for a long period of time will cause long term failure of an organization. So I want you to think back about culture and when you thought that culture has been created by a leader. And we're going to talk about that in class. There are some secondary mechanisms for helping develop organizational culture. A design of organizational structure. So having a centralized structure that reflects not only the leader, it reflects that only the leader can determine what's important. Having a decentralized reinforces individuals' initiatives and sharing. And so, depending on the situation, you may need to be more centralized or more decentralized. Designing of systems and procedures. So make sure there's an emphasis where there is ambiguity or where there's concern. Make sure that the systems are clearly delineated. So design of facilities. I think of PT clinics are all clinics designed to treat all types of patients. So I worked in a clinic that had no private treatment rooms. This obviously would not be a clinic that would be appropriate for pelvic health. So understanding the design of the facility and making sure it aligns with the culture that you want within your organization. Stories, legends, and myths. So stories of great leaders or employees reinforce the value of that clinic. And formal statements. The formal statements can be the mission and the vision of the organization. All right, we're going to stop here. I will continue in the next podcast with the second half of Chapter 8.